The alarm bells of Cather Prime rang like shattering glass through the crystal towers. Their sound had not been heard in 1,000 years, and for many in the city below, it was the first time they had ever known such a thing existed. Children froze in the streets. Merchants dropped their wares. The towers themselves seemed to tremble as if the world's own heart knew fear. Admiral Zir, his 6 legs pounding against the polished floors, rushed through the wide corridors of the Galactic Defense Hall. His joints ached, his carapace creaked with age, but never had he moved so fast. He already knew what the summons meant. The whispers had reached even the most remote sectors. The Void Hunters had returned. He burst into the Grand Council chamber, a vast dome lit by shifting blue-white light, where representatives of 47 civilizations sat in an arc that stretched high above. The chamber was silent, eerily so. A holographic display filled the space, projected from the council's heart. On it, 3 bright stars blinked out one after another. Worlds, once vibrant, now only black void. Zir felt his breath catch. 3 systems, billions of souls gone, entire histories erased as though they had never been. At the center of the chamber stood Commander Velashi, chosen not for rank but for her people. The Athathurans were beings of crystal and light, voices clear and calm even in chaos. But today, her voice shook with something none had ever heard from an Athathuran before: fear. "The outer defense grid is gone," she said, her crystal skin refracting the red of the warning beacons into 1,000 fractured rainbows across the chamber walls. "The Void Hunters broke through our strongest fortifications as if they were made of air. Our finest warships, our greatest weapons, did nothing. They consumed everything in their path." A trembling hand rose from the assembly. It belonged to Delegate Marn of the mining worlds. His people were practical and hardened by labor, yet his voice was frail. "How long Velashi hesitated. She held her datapad as if its numbers might cut her fingers. "At their speed, 3 months until they reach the core, maybe less." The chamber erupted. Shouts in dozens of tongues filled the air, some calling for retreat, others for final stands. Several simply collapsed into grief. The sound of it echoed across the dome like the cries of the doomed. Admiral Zir slammed the butt of his staff against the floor. The sharp note rang out like a cannon shot, silencing them. His eyes burned. "There is one option left, the emergency beacon." The room froze. All present knew what that meant. The beacon was legend, built at the founding of the Galactic Defense Network, designed to transmit beyond language, beyond distance, across every star system known. It was their ultimate plea for salvation, but it had never been used, because to use it meant admitting their entire civilization was powerless. Velashi looked across the sea of delegates. She saw despair, yes, but also something else. The tiny spark of beings who were not yet ready to surrender. "We vote," said the council speaker. It was swift, 47 votes unanimous. The beacon would be lit. Hours later, in the transmission chamber, Velashi stood alone at the array's core. Behind her, the brightest minds of 1,000 worlds watched. Scientists, generals, philosophers, and poets, all standing together in solemn silence. The array hummed, vibrating the air with the promise of power. She had prepared her words carefully. Yet as she looked at the blinking lights that represented every soul in their care, all her training, all her poise, threatened to collapse under the weight of it. She began, "This is Commander Velashi of the Galactic Defense Network. If anyone can hear this message, please listen. We are dying." Her voice cracked and she let it. They needed to hear the truth. "An ancient enemy has returned to our space. They consume entire worlds, leaving only silence and shadow. We have fought with everything we have, our bravest soldiers, our strongest weapons. Nothing can stop them. They are too powerful, too hungry, too cruel. Our children ask us why the stars are going dark, and we have no answer." The chamber behind her was still. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. "If there are heroes among the stars, if there are those who fight for justice, we beg you, hear us. We offer everything we have, our technology, our resources, our gratitude. Only do not let our light be extinguished." The beacon pulsed once, twice, and then flared into a light so bright Velashi had to shield her eyes. The message raced out across the void, quantum entangled, splitting into 1,000 reflections to be carried to the farthest edges of the galaxy. Velashi's hands trembled. It was done. Their fate now rested in the hands of strangers. On the far edge of the galaxy, a small blue world orbited a yellow star. In most galactic records, it was marked with a single word in bold red glyphs, DATHWORLD. Captain Jake Morrison sat in the communications bay of the research vessel New Horizon, sipping his morning coffee. The room hummed with low chatter as his crew monitored the usual radio static, bursts from pulsars, the faint songs of quasars. Routine work. Then Lieutenant Amy Carter spoke, her young voice cutting through the monotony. "Captain, I think I've got something. This isn't noise, it looks like a transmission." Morrison set down his mug. At 45, with gray streaks in his hair and the steady hands of a veteran, he had learned to take surprises seriously. He leaned over her console. "What kind of transmission?" Her fingers flew across the console. "Massive, multi-layered, encoded with quantum entanglement. Sir, this is light years beyond anything we have." The room fell silent as the ship's AI began decoding. For minutes, only the hum of processors filled the bay. Then the alien voice came. It was beautiful and terrible, a song of desperation. Worlds dying, children crying, a plea cast into the dark. When it ended, the room was heavy with silence. Sergeant Dan Phillips whispered, "They're asking for heroes." Amy's eyes brimmed with tears. "Billions of them, sir. They're begging someone to save them." Morrison stared at the scrolling data on the screen. He thought of his daughter back on Earth, safe, laughing, alive. He thought of these children, strangers in the dark, waiting for death. He straightened, his voice steady. "Lieutenant, open a secure channel to Earth Command. Priority Alpha. Tell them we have a situation that requires the highest attention." Amy hesitated. "What should I tell them, sir, about the nature of the situation?" Morrison looked at the empty stars on the main display. "Tell them someone out there needs heroes, and ask if we're interested in the job." The beacon's desperate plea had reached Earth, the most dangerous world in the galaxy. What would humanity decide? General Patricia Hayes hadn't slept more than 3 hours when the knock on her door came. It was past midnight in Washington, D.C., and she opened the file in her hand with a grim expression. The alien transmission glowed across her secure monitor, repeating the desperate voice of Commander Velashi. She had fought wars, seen cities burn, and watched men die. But she had never seen anything like this, an entire galaxy begging for salvation. Colonel Frank Miller, her aide, stood stiffly at attention. "Ma'am, orders." Hayes rubbed her eyes. The crystalline alien's words replayed in her head. Not statistics, not numbers, a mother's plea. She picked up the secure line. "Wake the President, wake the Joint Chiefs, wake everyone. We have a decision to make." By dawn, the White House Situation Room was filled with the most powerful leaders on Earth. President Richard Kine, hair disheveled, sat at the head of the long table. Around him, generals, admirals, scientists, and politicians crowded close. The air smelled of coffee, stress, and fear. The recording played one more time. The alien's shimmering face filled the screen, voice trembling with desperation. When it ended, silence stretched. Finally, the president spoke. "Let me make sure I've got this straight. Aliens are real. They're under attack by something called Void Hunters, and they want us to help." Dr. Sarah Williams, head of the Space Research Division, nodded. "Yes, sir. Based on the technology and the transmission, they're thousands of years ahead of us in most fields. Yet even they can't stop this enemy." Secretary of Defense Robert Clark leaned forward, steepling his fingers. "This could be a trap. For all we know, they're luring us into some galactic war we can't win. If we reveal ourselves, Earth becomes a target." Admiral Lisa Kine, the president's younger sister and commander of Earth's fledgling space fleet, slammed her fist on the table. "Did you see that transmission, Bob? That wasn't a trick. That was terror, real and raw. Those people are dying." The room divided instantly. Some demanded caution, hide, stay silent, protect Earth. Others argued for action, help fight, stand up against evil. The debate raged for hours. Finally, the president raised his hand. His voice was weary but firm. "My grandfather fought in World War II. He told me once, evil wins when good people do nothing. Maybe these aliens aren't like us, but they're begging for help. If we can help, we should. It's that simple." The room fell silent. Then came the vote, close, heated, but decisive. Earth would answer the call. Admiral Lisa Kine was summoned to lead. She had a reputation for accomplishing the impossible. She had once piloted a crippled vessel through an asteroid field and returned with every soul alive. She had fought pirates on the edge of the solar system, outnumbered and outgunned, and returned victorious. She was stubborn, brilliant, and terrifying when crossed. Within 6 hours, the largest mobilization in human history began. Civilian craft were retrofitted for war. Mining vessels became heavy carriers. Exploratory ships were outfitted with railguns, missile pods, and plasma cannons. Earth's orbit transformed into a staging ground. Factories churned night and day. Nations that had fought each other for centuries now stood side by side, united by a common purpose. On the deck of the USS Defiance, flagship of the hastily formed Earth Defense Force, Admiral Kine stood before her officers. Her uniform was immaculate, her gaze sharper than steel. Captain Mike Rodriguez, second in command, handed her the final readiness report. "Ma'am, all ships report combat ready. 57 vessels, 12,000 personnel, enough supplies for 6 months of operations." Kine looked through the wide viewport. The fleet floated in low Earth orbit, some sleek and deadly, others bulky and crude, but every one armed and determined. By galactic standards, it was nothing, but to her, it was everything humanity could give. She turned to her crew. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are heading into the unknown. We're outnumbered, outgunned, and we don't know if anyone will be waiting when we arrive. But make no mistake, the galaxy asked for heroes. Let's show them who we are." The fleet rumbled with engines warming. "Signal all ships," Kine ordered. "We jump in 10 minutes." Meanwhile, light years away, Commander Velashi sat on the bridge of her battered command ship. 3 days had passed since their desperate plea. The only responses had been condolences, apologies, or silence. Sympathy was not salvation. Her comms officer, a young Cathurian with wide, fearful eyes, looked up suddenly. "Commander, we're receiving a transmission. Emergency frequency." Velashi's heart skipped. She motioned quickly, put it through. The screen flickered, and an unfamiliar figure appeared. The being was bipedal, 2 arms, 2 legs, forward-facing eyes that burned with unsettling focus. Its face bore scars. Its hair was cut short, its uniform dark, yet it wasn't the strangeness of its form that shook her. It was the eyes. Eyes that showed no hesitation, no fear, no prey instinct, eyes of a predator that had never been prey. The voice was firm, unyielding. "This is Admiral Lisa Kine of the Earth Defense Force. We received your distress call. Where do you need us to fight?" The words were so direct, Velashi froze. No demands for territory, no negotiations, just a single, terrifying question: where do we fight? "Admiral Kine, we are grateful, but you must understand, the Void Hunters have never been defeated. They've consumed entire star systems. Our most advanced weapons barely scratch them." Kine didn't flinch. "How many ships do you have left?" 200 combat vessels across our coalition. "And enemy numbers?" Velashi checked her tactical readout, stomach twisting. "At least 500 bioships, more arriving every day." Kine turned to someone off-screen, then back. "We're bringing 57. Send us the coordinates of their next target." Velashi stared in shock as the transmission ended. 57 against 500? Madness. Either these humans were suicidal, or they knew something no one else did. She whispered to herself, "Deathworlders." Hours later, at the mining colony of Zirian Prime, the skies were already black. The Void Hunters had arrived. Their colossal bioships surrounded the planet, tendrils of living energy reaching down to strip the world bare. Oceans boiled black, forests shriveled to dust. 3 million souls remained below with barely hours to live. Velashi's meager fleet of 20 watched helplessly from a distance. To attack meant annihilation. To retreat meant abandoning a world. Her science officer spoke, voice trembling. "At this rate of consumption, 6 hours before all life is gone." 6 hours, not enough time for a miracle. Then her sensors screamed. "Commander, multiple ships dropping out of hyperspace." Velashi expected reinforcements, or a desperate final wave of Void Hunters. But what appeared defied all logic. 57 strange, angular ships emerged directly inside the Hunter formation, reckless, suicidal, insane. No species jumped into a battlefield like that. "Identify them," Velashi shouted. The tactical officer hesitated. Unknown configuration, wait, receiving a transmission. The screen filled again with the scarred, sharp-eyed human. Admiral Kine's voice was calm, almost casual. Commander Velashi, this is Admiral Kine. We're beginning our attack run. You might want to pull your ships back. Velashi's mouth went dry. Attack run, but you're... The human fleet ignited engines and accelerated straight into the maw of the Void Hunters. The most suicidal thing Velashi had ever witnessed. And it had just begun. 57 human ships plunge headlong into 500 Void Hunters at Zirian Prime. The galaxy holds its breath. The void above Zirian Prime boiled with movement. Massive bioships drifted like leviathans, their hulls pulsing with dark energy. For centuries they had hunted without fear, stripping worlds bare with methodical hunger. Nothing had ever stood in their way. Until now, 57 human ships cut into their formation like blades thrown into the heart of a storm. Engines flared bright. Hulls rattled under the strain. Every officer on Velashi's bridge gasped as the human fleet ignored every standard tactic, plunging directly into weapons range. Her second-in-command shouted, "They're mad. They'll be annihilated before they fire a single shot." Velashi didn't answer. She couldn't. Her crystalline hands clutched the edge of her console as she stared at the display. The Void Hunters reacted slowly at first, confused by such audacity. Then, like a wounded predator, they struck. Bolts of energy enough to shatter moons lanced across space. 3 beams tore straight into the flagship USS Defiance, Admiral Kine's vessel. Velashi expected to see it torn apart in an instant. Instead, she watched in horror and awe as the human ship kept coming. Shields flared and cracked. The hull scorched black, but the Defiance did not break. "Close the gap," Kine barked on her bridge, voice calm over the roar of alarms. "I want point-blank firing solutions." Her gunnery officer stared at her. "Ma'am, we're already suicidal close." "Closer." The human way of war. Captain Ben Parker of the destroyer USS Vengeance gritted his teeth as his forward shields collapsed. His ship trembled, bulkheads groaning under alien fire. Any other species would have broken formation, retreated, or tried to regroup. Parker drove his ship forward. "Target their neural clusters. Cox, bring us in within ramming distance." His navigation officer gaped. "Sir, that's insane." "Then let's be insane. Execute." The Vengeance dove between the living turrets of a Hunter bioship, weaving through plasma fire so close the hull melted in streaks. At such proximity, the destroyer's primitive railguns and missile pods could finally bite deep. For the first time in 1,000 years, a Void Hunter screamed. Not in words, but in the psychic shriek of a predator that had never known pain. Parker grinned through blood on his teeth. "That's right, bleed." Velashi watches. On Velashi's command ship, stunned silence reigned. Her crew watched as tiny, fragile human vessels did the impossible. They did not retreat. They did not scatter. They drove into the storm. 3 more Hunters turned their titanic weapons on the humans. Entire cruisers were swallowed in fire. Velashi's heart clenched as she saw one human ship vanish in the blaze, only to emerge from the inferno with half its hull gone, still firing every gun it had. "Why aren't they breaking?" her science officer whispered. "Any rational species would." Velashi understood. Her voice was hushed, awed. "They don't fight like us. They fight like their only choice is victory or extinction." "Sacrifice." On the USS Hurricane, Captain Maria Santos pushed her ship to the brink. The cruiser's engines howled as she skimmed so close to a Hunter's hide that living flesh splattered against her hull. Main batteries full spread. Her weapons tore into the creature's neural core. The bioship convulsed, its tentacles writhing before collapsing into itself. A Void Hunter, one of the ancient terrors of the galaxy, died screaming. But victory had a price. In another sector of the battle, Staff Sergeant Tony Rodriguez led a Marine boarding squad into a crippled bioship. The corridors were alive, pulsing with organic tissue, reeking of rot and acid. The squad advanced, plasma rifles blazing. They encountered a wave of Hunter warriors, monstrosities of teeth and claws. Rodriguez pulled a plasma grenade from his belt. "Remember the Alamo," he shouted, charging headlong into the enemy. The explosion ripped through the chamber. Rodriguez and half his squad died instantly. But the path cleared, allowing the demolition team to plant charges at the ship's neural heart. Minutes later, the bioship exploded in fire. On Velashi's sensors, another hunter fell. Her crystalline skin quivered. They die willingly to buy seconds for each other. She had never seen anything like it. Breaking the impossible. For 4 relentless hours, the battle raged. Humans fought in small packs, weaving between monstrosities 10 times their size. Their weapons, primitive by galactic standards, became devastating at close range. Their tactics were reckless, brutal, and effective. 7 Void Hunters fell, 7, a number no fleet had ever achieved. The Hunters, confused and wounded, did something no one had seen in centuries. They retreated. Aftermath. On the bridge of the Defiance, smoke filled the air. Fires burned on 3 decks. Dozens lay dead, but the ship still lived. Admiral Kyne stood at her command chair, uniform torn, face smeared with ash, but her eyes steady. Velashi appeared on the comm, crystalline features flickering. Her voice was full of disbelief. Admiral, that was impossible. The Void Hunters have never been defeated in open combat. Kyne allowed herself the faintest of smiles. Commander, you asked for heroes. What you got was humanity, and were too stubborn to die quietly. Across the galaxy, word spread faster than light. The impossible had happened. For the first time in recorded history, the Void Hunters bled. In council chambers across 1,000 worlds, leaders argued, panicked, wept. Some saw hope, others saw danger. Admiral Zier stood before the Galactic Council, his 6 legs trembling. Honored delegates, we have witnessed the impossible. The humans from the edge of the galaxy have accomplished what our greatest minds declared hopeless. They have made the Void Hunters retreat. The chamber erupted. Some demanded alliance, others whispered caution. After all, if humans could defeat the Void Hunters, what might they do to the rest of the galaxy? Velashi, summoned to testify, spoke with quiet certainty. I have fought beside these humans. They are not like us. They fight as if death means nothing. But more than that, they fight as if the alternative to victory is unthinkable. They saved civilians without asking for tribute, without demanding territory. They fight, not for conquest, but because they cannot stand by while innocents die. Her words fell like stones into a still pond, rippling across the chamber. The galaxy was no longer the same. The Void Hunters had been bloodied but not defeated. In their retreat, they prepared something new. And in the shadows, alien leaders debated, were the Deathworlders saviors or the next great threat? The great chamber of the Galactic Council shimmered with voices. News of Zirian Prime's salvation had spread like wildfire. For the first time in centuries, the Void Hunters had retreated. For the first time in living memory, hope stirred. But hope came with fear. Admiral Zier stood tall, his 6 legs planted firmly, his staff gleaming. Honored delegates, the humans have accomplished what we believed impossible. They struck down the Hunters, they bled them, they saved a world. The chamber erupted, some with cheers, others with alarm. Delegate Thessera, from the scientific worlds, rose with a wave of her slender limbs. Yes, they are powerful, but that is precisely the danger. If they can do what none of us can, then what happens when they turn their eyes on us? Do we risk replacing one terror with another? The murmur swelled, unease rippling through the chamber. Commander Velashi, summoned as a witness, stepped forward. Her crystalline form glittered, refracting light like a prism. The chamber fell silent as she spoke. I fought beside them. I saw their ships burn, their soldiers fall. They did not ask for tribute. They did not demand reward. They risked everything for a world that was not theirs. Her voice softened. They fight differently, yes, terrifyingly so, but not for conquest. They fight because to them surrender is worse than death. The chamber whispered like wind through dry leaves. For every counselor swayed by her words, another grew uneasy. Still the final motion passed, narrow, contested, but binding. The coalition would seek alliance with the humans. Aboard the Defiance. On the USS Defiance, Admiral Lisa Kyne leaned over the tactical holodable as reports streamed in. Her fleet was battered but alive. The engineers worked nonstop patching holes in hulls. Marines counted their dead, burying comrades in the only way possible, slipping their bodies into the eternal dark of space. A chime announced an incoming transmission. Velashi's crystalline figure appeared in the conference room. Behind her, projections of the council flickered, leaders from dozens of worlds, studying the humans as though trying to decide if they were saviors or monsters. Council leader Thesera spoke first. Admiral Kine, on behalf of the Coalition, we thank you for saving Zirian Prime. We wish to discuss joint operations against the Void Hunters. Kine's jaw tightened. She wasn't one for politics. Glad we could help. What's the tactical situation? The councilors exchanged uncertain glances. They had prepared long speeches, diplomatic overtures, rituals of alliance. The human admiral had cut through them in one breath. Velashi answered, "The hunters are regrouping. Our intelligence suggests a massive offensive aimed at the core systems. They have never faced resistance like yours before. They are adapting." Kine studied the map, her eyes sharp. The hunters controlled dozens of worlds, hundreds of ships. Her own fleet was a fraction of that. Even with the Coalition's remnants, they were badly outnumbered. She turned to her officers. Colonel Bryant, ground assessment. Colonel Nick Bryant leaned over the table, scarred knuckles drumming against its surface. Standard liberation protocol. Drop troops, clear hostiles, secure civilians, move to the next target, one world at a time. Velashi's crystalline brows furrowed. Liberation protocol, you speak of simply killing everything. Bryant's eyes were steel. If it's trying to eat civilians, yes, we kill it, simple as that. The aliens shifted uncomfortably. The bluntness was unnerving. Major Kelly Santos, intelligence officer, chimed in with unsettling enthusiasm. Bioadaptive tech, hive mind coordination, planetary drain systems, fascinating. I've been itching to test countermeasures. This will be fun. Velashi's people, schooled in caution and analysis, recoiled. The humans spoke of war the way miners spoke of breaking rock. Direct, brutal, efficient. The cost of alliance. Later, Velashi approached Kine privately. Her crystalline form shimmered in the dim briefing room. Admiral, I must ask, why risk everything for us? You've never seen our worlds, you don't know our people, why not stay hidden? Kine considered. Her scarred hands rested on the table. Because bullies don't stop, they just get hungrier. If we let the hunters eat you, they'll come for us eventually. Better to hit them now while we still have a choice. Velashi tilted her head, refracting the light like a crystal star. So it is survival. Kine shook her head. It's responsibility. My people, we come from a death world. Every day, everything tried to kill us, storms, predators, even the ground beneath our feet. We learned early that if someone's in trouble, you help, because next time it'll be you, and no one survives alone. Velashi was silent for a long moment. For the first time, she began to believe that perhaps these humans were not simply predators, perhaps they were something rarer. Allies. The hunters adapt. In the darkness between stars, the Void Hunters brooded. The loss at Zirian Prime had shocked them. Pain was unfamiliar. Fear alien, yet hive minds adapted quickly. Their psychic chorus whispered across the void. The prey fights with fury. The prey burns itself to burn us. The prey must be broken differently. New strategies formed. Instead of overwhelming with sheer force, they would learn from their enemies. They would isolate, divide, starve, and then consume. The hunters had never faced predators before. Now they began to change. Forward base. Weeks later, the humans had established their first forward base. A captured hunter staging post converted into a fortress. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Humanity's first alien territory was literally ripped from the enemy's bones. On the command deck, Admiral Kine reviewed reports. More ships from Earth were en route. Supply lines were thin but holding. The Coalition fleets trickled in, damaged and frightened but willing to follow. Morale was strange. The aliens feared the humans almost as much as they feared the hunters. But fear was not always a weakness. Sometimes it was the beginning of respect. Velashi entered, her crystalline form carrying an unusual weight. The Council debates endlessly. They fear you. They fear what you represent, but they cannot deny results. They have authorized joint operations. Kine's lips curved in a faint, dangerous smile. Good, then it's time we go hunting. Shadows of doubt. Yet not all was unity. In a dark chamber of the Council, certain delegates whispered. The humans are reckless, dangerous. They destroy as much as they save. Today they fight the hunters, tomorrow perhaps us. Fear festered, seeds of division were sown. The next target. On the Defiance, Kine gathered her officers and Velashi. A new report glowed across the Holodable, an occupied world, once home to billions, now a feeding ground. Bryant leaned in. If we strike fast, we can liberate survivors, but intel shows the hunters massing new types of ships, heavier armor, adaptive shielding. Santos's eyes gleamed. Perfect. Let's see how well they adapt when we ram nukes down their throats. Kine studied the map. She felt the weight of the choice. Every jump risked annihilation, yet hesitation was worse. Signal the fleet, plot a course. We hit them hard, we hit them fast, and we don't stop until they break. Velashi felt a tremor of fear and awe. These humans had faced an enemy the galaxy thought eternal and decided to go on the offensive. But deep in the shadows of the void, the hunters had already changed. They were waiting. The Coalition prepares its first true joint offensive with humanity, but the Void Hunters have evolved, ready to unleash horrors never seen before. The planet Doros IV had once been a garden world, vast oceans, green continents, cities glittering with towers of white stone. Now it was a husk. Forests withered, seas turned to black sludge. The Void Hunters had dug their tendrils deep into the planet's core, drawing life itself from its bones. From orbit, Admiral Lisa Kine studied the tactical display with cold eyes. Her fleet floated in formation, 57 battered vessels now reinforced by Coalition ships, 170 in total. On the opposite side of the planet loomed the Hunters, nearly 400 bioships, clustered like carrion beasts feeding. Colonel Bryant leaned on the Holodable, jaw tight. We'll need to punch a corridor through their lines for the dropships. Civilians are still alive down there. Sensors show millions in stasis pods, waiting to be consumed. Velashi shivered, her crystalline form refracting dim light. If we fail, they will not merely die. They will be erased as if they never lived. Major Santos grinned with grim eagerness. Then let's give the hunters indigestion. Kine's gaze never wavered. Form up, we strike in waves, hard and fast. But as the fleets moved into position, something shifted. The trap. The hunters did not attack immediately. Instead, they spread apart, forming a wide net. Their bioships pulsed with strange new energy. On Velashi's command ship, her science officer's voice trembled. Commander, they're changing frequencies. Their shields adapting. They've incorporated human tactics into their hive mind. On the Defiance, alarms blared. Admiral, they're mimicking our formation. They're using counterflanking maneuvers, human maneuvers. For the first time, Kine's jaw tightened. So, they've been learning. The Void Hunters struck. Energy beams ripped across space with frightening precision. They didn't fire randomly now. They targeted engines, reactors, weak points. Entire Coalition cruisers exploded before they could fire a shot. Captain Mike Rodriguez slammed his fist against his console. They're fighting like us. Kine's eyes hardened. Then let's remind them what being human really means. The fight for Doros IV. The human fleet dove headlong into the fire. The Defiance led, its railguns blazing at point-blank range. Marines prepared for boarding actions even before shields were down. Captain Parker of the Vengeance bared his teeth as his ship skimmed past a bioship's tentacles, firing missiles directly into its open maw. The explosion tore through flesh and bone, but moments later, the bioship began to regenerate, its wounds knitting. It's healing, his tactical officer cried. Then hit it harder, Parker roared. Meanwhile, Colonel Bryant's dropships plunged into atmosphere, dodging tendrils of dark energy. Civilians lay trapped in stasis pods, stacked in towers of organic growth like grotesque hives. Marines stormed the surface, blasting their way through hunter drones. Private Anna Lee carved through enemies with her rifle, screaming above the chaos. For Earth, for the ones who can't fight. Her squad reached the first pods, tearing them open with plasma cutters. Pale, terrified aliens gasped as light hit their eyes for the first time in weeks. Move them, evac routes are hot, Bryant bellowed, hauling one survivor on his shoulders. We don't leave anyone behind. Velashi's terror. From orbit, Velashi watched the humans fight. They were being slaughtered, Half their ships ablaze, entire squads on the ground torn apart by swarms, yet they did not stop. They fought like drowning swimmers clawing for air, each second bought with blood. Her second-in-command whispered, "They're mad, utterly mad." Velashi's voice cracked. "No, they're human." The turning point. Back in orbit, Kine made her decision. "All ships converge on their command node. They've learned from us. Fine, then we'll hit them where it hurts." The node was massive, a pulsating monstrosity orbiting Doros IV, controlling the Hunter fleet. To reach it meant flying through a gauntlet of living weapons. The Defiance surged ahead, shields collapsing under enemy fire. Kine stood firm. "Target their heart, kill the brain, the body dies." Coalition captains hesitated, terrified, but the humans plunged forward, dragging the others in their wake. The first ships exploded in the maelstrom, still more pressed on. The Hurricane fired its last salvo before being ripped apart. The Vengeance rammed into a Hunter maw, detonating its reactor in a blaze that blinded sensors. And then one shot struck true. The Defiance's main railgun pierced the command node, splitting it apart in a burst of light and gore. The Hunter fleet convulsed. Without coordination, they thrashed in confusion. Now, Kine barked, "Hit them with everything." Coalition ships, emboldened, unleashed fire. Bioships collapsed one after another, unable to adapt without their hive mind's guidance. On the ground, Marines roared as Hunter drones spasmed and collapsed. Thousands of civilians were dragged free, shuttled to orbit, saved from the jaws of oblivion. The cost. Victory came, but at a price. 30 human ships destroyed, tens of thousands dead, half the fleet crippled. In the aftermath, Velashi's crystalline form shimmered with sorrow as she stood beside Kine on the Defiance's scorched bridge. "You lost so much, yet you call this victory." Kine's voice was raw. "Because they're alive, that's the only metric that matters." Velashi looked at her, struggling to understand. "How do you keep fighting, knowing the cost?" Kine met her gaze. "Because the alternative is watching children die, and I won't stand for that." Velashi had no words. In her heart, she realized something. These humans were not saviors. They were something more dangerous. They were survivors who refused to die, even if it meant tearing the stars themselves apart. Seeds of betrayal. Back in the council chambers, however, unease festered. Delegates watched the footage. Ships ramming, soldiers sacrificing themselves, humans fighting like rabid predators. The Sarah whispered to her allies. "They bleed the Hunters, yes, but they bleed themselves just as willingly. Such creatures cannot be trusted. If they can kill gods, what will they do to us?" The seeds were sown. Fear began to twist into suspicion. The Hunters whisper. Deep in the void, the surviving Hunters withdrew, their hive song fractured but alive. The prey adapts. The prey sacrifices. The prey will consume itself if pushed. And in the dark, the Hunters plotted. They had learned humanity's strength. Now they would exploit its greatest weakness, compassion. The battle for Doros IV is won, but at catastrophic cost. Humanity has proven they can win, but the Council begins to fear them, and the Hunters prepare to strike at humanity's very heart. The War Council chamber aboard the USS Defiance was filled with tension so thick it was almost suffocating. Alien delegates shimmered in holographic projection, their voices overlapping in dozens of tones, each one carrying doubt. Admiral Lisa Kine stood with her hands braced on the holodable, her uniform still singed from Doros IV. Across from her, Commander Velashi shifted uneasily, crystalline facets dimmed by exhaustion. Council leader the Sarah's voice rang out sharp. Yes, the humans liberated Doros IV, but at what cost? 30 of their own ships destroyed, tens of thousands dead, and an entire system left in ruins. This is not salvation. It is madness. Another delegate hissed, "They do not value life. They throw themselves at the enemy like rabid beasts. If their fury turns on us, what then?" Kine's eyes narrowed. "If it weren't for us, Doros IV would already be ash. You'd be counting the dead, not debating tactics." Velashi tried to intervene, her voice calm despite the fracture lines forming in her crystalline body. "Admiral Kine speaks truth. Without humanity, the Hunters would remain unstoppable. They are flawed, yes, but their flaws are their strength." But the Sarah was not swayed. Seeds of fear had taken root, and fear whispered louder than reason. Shadows of treachery. Later, in the dim corridors of the Coalition outpost orbiting Doro's IV, whispers turned into action. A faction of delegates, fearful of humanity's raw power, began plotting in secret. Their plan was simple: weaken the humans before they became too strong. Leak partial fleet coordinates to the Void Hunters. Let humanity bleed itself out. Then, when the dust settled, the Council would reclaim control. Velashi overheard fragments of the conspiracy in hushed voices, her crystalline body refracting sound in ways the conspirators did not expect. Her heart twisted with horror. Could her own people be so blind? She knew one thing: if the humans discovered betrayal, the fragile alliance would shatter. The Hunters strike back. The betrayal came swiftly. 3 days later, the human relief convoy bound for Doro's IV was ambushed in the void. 10 transports carrying weapons, medicine, and refugees were torn apart by Hunter bioships lying in wait. When word reached the Defiance, Admiral Kyne's face went pale with cold fury. Captain Mike Rodriguez read the casualty reports aloud, voice breaking. 7,000 dead, mostly civilians, kids, Admiral. The bridge went silent. Marines clenched their fists, sailors bowed their heads. Kyne's jaw was stone. They knew our route, someone fed it to them. All eyes turned to the Coalition envoys aboard the station. Velashi stepped forward, trembling. "Admiral, I swear to you, not all of us." Kyne cut her off, voice sharp as a blade. "Not all of you, but somebody, and I intend to find out who." Breaking point. At the emergency council meeting, Kyne didn't mince words. "My people bled to save you, and someone here slit our throats in the dark. You think you're afraid of us? You should be afraid of what happens if we find out which one of you sold us out." The chamber rippled with panic. Even Velashi's crystalline skin shuddered under the heat of Kyne's words. The Sarah, however, sneered. "You see, they threaten even their allies. Brutal, uncivilized. This is what happens when you trust a Deathworld species." Velashi's voice cracked like splintering glass. "It is your treachery that killed them, not theirs." But the damage was done. The Coalition fractured. Some worlds called for full alliance with humanity, others demanded the humans be restrained or expelled. The Hunters had not needed to strike directly. Suspicion was their weapon now, and it was cutting the alliance apart. Humanity's response. That night, aboard the Defiance, Kyne gathered her senior staff in the war room. Colonel Bryant slammed a fist onto the table. "This is pointless. They're gutless politicians, more afraid of us than the monsters eating their stars. Let's pull out, regroup with reinforcements from Earth, and handle this war ourselves." Rodriguez shook his head. "We can't fight 400 bioships with what's left. We need them whether they like it or not." Santos leaned forward, eyes glittering with that unnerving hunger for the fight. "Then we show them something undeniable. A victory so brutal, so decisive, they'll have no choice but to follow us." Kyne's eyes flicked to Velashi, who stood silent, torn between her people and the humans she had come to respect. "What would you do, Commander?" Kyne asked quietly. Velashi hesitated, her crystalline skin dim with sorrow. "If you leave, we are lost. If you stay, you may yet save us. But if you stay angry, you will become the very terror they fear." Kyne nodded slowly. "Then we bleed for them again, but on our terms." The Hunters' new weapon. Scouts reported the Hunters massing near Crotho's station, a strategic hub sitting at the crossroads of multiple star lanes. If it fell, half the Coalition's surviving fleets would be cut off. The humans prepared to intercept. But when the Defiance's fleet arrived, what awaited them was unlike anything they had seen. The Hunters had evolved again. Massive new constructs drifted among their fleet, hybrids of flesh and machine, pulsating with stolen technology. Human technology. The ambushed convoy had not just been destroyed, it had been digested. The Hunters now fielded weapons that fired railgun slugs, shields that bent like human deflectors. Their hive mind hummed with strategies stolen from humanity's blood. On the Defiance's bridge, Santos swore. "They're learning faster than we can kill them." Kyne's lips pressed thin. "Then we stop teaching and start exterminating." Velashi's choice. In the chaos of battle preparations, Valashi approached Kine privately. "Admiral, I know who betrayed you." Kine's eyes locked onto her. "Name." Valashi hesitated. To speak meant condemning entire delegations. To stay silent meant letting the hunters grow stronger. Her crystalline form trembled under the weight of choice. It was not one world, it was a faction. The Sarah and her allies, they believe weakening you will save them from you after the war. Kine's stare was colder than space itself. Then they've just signed their own death warrant. Velashi's voice cracked. "Admiral, please, if you strike at them, the alliance will shatter. The hunters will win without firing a shot." Kine's silence stretched, heavy as a gun barrel pointed at Velashi's chest. Finally, Kine spoke. "Then we'll win so loudly, the Council won't dare betray us again." The Battle of Krothos. The void erupted as the fleets clashed. Hunter hybrids unleashed railgun fire and plasma storms. Coalition ships burned in droves. The Defiance led from the front, ripping into bioships with everything it had. Colonel Bryant's dropships pierced the maelstrom, Marines storming the station's skeletal remains. Fighting room by room, they planted charges, detonated hunter growths, and tore civilians free from cages of flesh. Private Anna Lee cut down wave after wave, her rifle overheating in her hands. She whispered through gritted teeth, "Not one more world, not one more family." On Velashi's flagship, her officers begged her to retreat. She refused. Her voice rang through the bridge, fragile but firm. "If the humans can bleed for us, then we can bleed for them. Hold the line." The battle was chaos. Blood, fire, and screams filled the void. But inch by inch, humanity's madness became momentum. When the dust cleared, Krothos Station still stood. The hunters were driven back again, wounded, enraged, but alive. Aftermath. The cost was staggering, nearly half the fleet crippled, thousands dead. But the Council could no longer deny results. Even the Sarah's allies fell silent in the face of survival. Valashi stood beside Kine as the wounded were counted. "Admiral, you were right. They follow you now, not from trust, but because they have no other choice." Kine's eyes were hard. "Then we make them see we're more than predators, we're protectors. But first, we finish this." Far out in the void, the hunters regrouped once more. Their hive mind whispered with cold clarity. "The prey cannot be broken with claws alone. Strike at the heart, strike at their home." The hunters, beaten again, set their sights on Earth itself, and the galaxy braces for the final reckoning. The warning reached the USS Defiance in the dead of ship's night. "Admiral," Captain Rodriguez said grimly, his face pale in the flickering glow of the holodable, "scouts confirm it. The hunters are moving, not toward another colony, not a coalition world. They're heading for Earth." The words hit the bridge like a gunshot. Even the hardened Marines froze. Velashi's crystalline skin flickered with anguish. "They mean to strike at your heart, to break you as you broke them." Admiral Lisa Kine stood perfectly still, her scarred hands tightening on the edge of the console. Her voice, when it came, was ice. "Then we'll show them what happens when you threaten our home." The last mobilization. The call went out across the stars. Earth's shipyards thundered with life. Civilian freighters were stripped and plated with armor. Mining rigs turned into carriers. Nations emptied their coffers for one final gamble. In orbit above Earth, the largest human fleet in history assembled. 137 ships, scarred, untested, but armed with every weapon humanity had ever built. Coalition reinforcements trickled in as well, damaged fleets from dozens of worlds, their captains grim but resolute. The void above Earth glittered with 1,000 drives. Humanity was no longer fighting alone. In the Situation Room back on Earth, President Kine addressed the world. His voice carried to every screen, every speaker, every home. "They come to erase us, but we are Deathworlders. We do not go quietly. We will stand, we will fight, and we will endure for our children, for every world that cried out in the dark, for the galaxy." Cheers erupted across continents. Humanity had never been more united. The hunters' arrival. When the hunters came, the stars themselves seemed to dim. Their fleet was the largest ever seen, nearly 1,000 bioships, swollen with stolen power, their hive song shrieking through the void. At their center hung the Nexus, a grotesque station forged from the bones of consumed worlds. Its size dwarfed Earth's moon. It pulsed with dark light, birthing new hunters even as it advanced. Velashi whispered on the Defiance's bridge, her crystalline voice quivering. That is their heart, the Nexus. If it falls, they fall. Kine nodded once. Then that's our target. Into the fire. The fleets clashed above the blue jewel of Earth. Hunter beams scythed through space, tearing coalition cruisers apart. Human railguns hammered in return, slamming slugs into alien flesh. Missiles streaked like fireflies across the void. Entire ships vanished in blossoms of flame. Colonel Bryant led dropships loaded with Marines into the maelstrom, aiming for the Nexus itself. Thousands of soldiers hurled into the jaws of hell, knowing few would return. On the ground, Earth's defenses lit the skies. Rail batteries fired from the surface. Atmospheric fighters screamed upward, diving headlong into Hunter swarms. The planet itself had become a fortress. Admiral Kine's voice cut through the chaos. All ships form on me. We break the Nexus open, or none of this matters. The Defiance surged forward, blazing through enemy fire, dragging battered coalition vessels in its wake. The battle inside. Colonel Bryant's Marines slammed into the Nexus, armored pods burrowing through its living shell. They emerged into corridors that pulsed with flesh and stank of decay. Hunter warriors poured from the walls, claws raking, shrieks echoing. Private Anna Lee cut down one after another, her armor slick with alien ichor. Keep moving, plant the charges. Sergeant Cade dragged 2 wounded soldiers forward, roaring into his comm. For Earth, for every world they took. Deep in the Nexus's core, Bryant's squad reached the central neural node, a pulsating mass the size of a cathedral, alive with psychic energy. Marines set their nuclear charges even as Hunters swarmed. Bryant knew they wouldn't get out. He keyed his comm to Kine. Admiral, the charges are armed, 60 seconds. Kine's voice came back, quiet but steady. Understood, Nick. The price of victory. On the Defiance, Velashi felt the psychic scream ripple through space as the Nexus realized what was happening. Hunter ships convulsed, hurling themselves desperately toward the Marines. Too late. The explosions ripped through the Nexus in a chain of fire. The station shuddered, cracked, and then tore apart in a blinding storm of light. The psychic hive song shattered. Across the void, Hunter ships spasmed, thrashing in confusion. Without their command mind, they were blind, vulnerable. Kine slammed her fist down. All ships finish them. Human and coalition vessels surged forward, tearing through the disorganized Hunters. One by one, the monsters burned. For the first time in galactic history, the predators of millennia became prey. Silence. When it was over, the void was filled with wreckage. Hundreds of ships, human, alien, Hunter, drifted as lifeless husks. Smoke and blood filled the decks of those still alive. On the Defiance, Kine stood amidst the wounded, her uniform torn, her eyes hollow with exhaustion. Rodriguez approached, his voice low. It's over, Admiral, they're gone. Velashi's crystalline skin glowed faintly, her voice trembling with awe. You did it, you ended them. Kine shook her head slowly. Not me, us. Every soldier, every ship, every world that stood when it mattered. The Council reconvenes. Weeks later, the surviving coalition leaders gathered once more. The chamber was scarred, its once pristine crystal cracked from the weight of war. Admiral Zier spoke, his 6 legs trembling with emotion. The Void Hunters are gone. Extinction has been turned aside, and it was humanity, the Deathworlders, who lit the beacon of survival. Some delegates wept openly, others sat silent, still haunted by fear. The Sarah, humbled but unbroken, whispered bitterly. They saved us, but at what cost? Will they always fight for us, or one day against us? Velashi rose, her crystalline body glowing bright with conviction. I fought beside them. I saw their dead carried into the stars. They fight not for conquest, not for glory. They fight because they refuse to let children die in the dark. That is who they are. The chamber fell silent. For the first time there was no denial, no debate, only truth. The beacon lives. Back aboard the Defiance, Admiral Kine sat in her ready room, staring at Earth through the viewport. Her face was lined with scars, her eyes weary but unbroken. Velashi entered quietly. You have given us back more than life. You have given us a future. Kine managed a small, tired smile. Then don't waste it. Build something better than what came before. Velashi tilted her head. And you, Admiral, what will humanity do now? Kine looked back at the stars. We'll be ready, because somewhere out there someone else will light another beacon, and when they do, we'll answer. The galactic record on Earth was quietly updated. The entry for humanity still bore the ancient warning in red glyphs, DATHWORLD. But now, a new note had been added beneath it. Inhabitants, available for aid in times of peril, dangerous but loyal. If you cry for help, they will come. And so, in the aftermath of fire and blood, a legend was born. The legend of the Beacon of the Deathworlders.